In this session, we're going to discuss how to set up a multi-seam program to allow the sewing of the same pattern over and over again. We can have up to 99 separate seams in as many different patterns as we want. For instance, if you had 3 or 4 different sizes of the same pattern, you can program each one of those individually, and the operator can switch back and forth between them. So, to first program our seam, we will press the P button to program, and then the 0 button to activate the multi-seam program. What we're showing now is program number 1, seam number 1, and we're going to enter that seam. Now, do we want stitch counting or do we want photo sew? Well, in this particular pattern, we're going to first do a beginning back tack with 3 stitches by 3 stitches. And our back tack is set. Next, we're going to do a stitch counted seam of 50 stitches. So, activate the stitch count. We'll press the plus button and run that up to 50. Okay. At the end of this seam, we're going to lift the foot so that we can turn our material, and we're going to, of course, stop in the needle down position. So once that is set, we will enter that seam and go to seam number 2. Seam number 2, we don't need a beginning back tack, but we're going to activate the stitch count, and this time sew 25 stitches. So there's our 25 stitches. We will also stop needle down and lift the foot automatically at the end of the seam, turn off the photo cell, and there is our seam number 2. Enter that seam, we'll go to seam number 3. Seam number 3, again, we're going to activate our stitch count and sew 50 stitches to match the other leg. Okay, so there's our 50 stitches. Again, we will stop needle down and we will lift the foot so we can turn the material. Seam number 4, we will enter seam 3. Seam number 4, again, we will activate the stitch count. Go back to our 25 stitches. And there's our 25 stitches. You have approximately 2 to 3 seconds to reach over and start pressing on the plus button to set our stitch count. So there's seam number 4. We're going to turn off the photo cell we do not need. We're going to turn on our ending back tack. There's our backward leg, our forward leg. Again, 3 by 3 stitches. Our trimmer and wiper are turned on. We do not need the automatic foot lift at this point since we're not going to be stopping in the seam to turn the material. And we're going to be stopping in the needle up position after our thread trimming. Okay, now we will enter this seam. So those are our 4 seams. We do not want seam number 5. At this point, we will click out of the programming mode by pressing the P button again. Twice. Now, press the 0 button to activate our seam, and there's our first seam in the program number 1. Seam number 2, 25 stitches. Seam number 3, 50 stitches. Seam 25 stitches and ending back tack and thread trim. We press the E button again and we're back to the beginning seam. You can cycle through each seam in the program by repeatedly pressing the E button. Okay. Now we want to do a second seam, or a second program actually, with a different stitch count, making a bigger pattern of the same type. So I'm going to turn off the pattern seam, press the P button, then the 0 button. Now we want to enter program number 2 since we already have program number 1. So we're going to press the 0 and the 2 button to get our program number 2. Enter that. We'll go to seam number 1 in the second program. We will enter that seam And we're going to be very similar to other program, but we're going to have a different size. This time we'll do 75 stitches by 50. So we will set our beginning back tack, 3 stitches by 3 stitches. We'll turn on our stitch count and set it to 75. All right, there's our 75 stitches, and jumps back to the middle, show that it is set. We will turn on our foot lift automatic, so turn our material, and set it to stop needle down so we can turn the material, and we're going to enter seam number 1. Seam number 2, no back tack here, but we will turn on our stitch count and set this now to 50 stitches. There's our 50 stitches, and it's now set. We will lift our foot and stop needle down at the end of the seam so we can turn our material, and enter seam number 2. Seam number 3, again, we will set our stitch count at 75 to match the other side. There's our 75 stitches, and it is now set. Set it to lift the foot, stop needle down so we can turn our material, and we will enter seam number 3. Seam number 4. Again, we will set our stitch count. We'll go to 50 stitches to match the other side. We have our 50 stitches set. We are going to do an ending back tack. There's our reverse leg with 3 stitches. Our forward leg with 3 stitches. And our ending back tack is set. We'll turn on our trimmer and our wiper. Both arrows are lit. We do not need the automatic foot lift at this point, and we will stop with the needle in the up position. We'll enter seam number 4. We do not want a seam 5 here, so we are going to click out now in the programming mode, pressing the P button 2 times. Now let's check our program. There is program number 2, seam 1, seam 2, seam 3, seam 4, and then back to seam 1. We want to switch to our other program. We'll just press the minus button and it'll go to program number 1. And we can walk through these steps: seam 2, seam 3, seam 4, and back to seam number 1. Like I said earlier, you can program up to 99 total different seams in as many different patterns or programs as you'd like, as long as you do not exceed 99 total seams. You can switch between any program by pressing the plus or minus button. And you can see it doesn't matter which one you press. And to look through each seam in the pattern to check it, we just cycle with the E button, and the machine is ready to sew.